you say that there's a lot of possibilities about what this could be,
Sure.
from a foreign adversary to something else entirely. I mean, can you just walk me through what the
Sure.
range of possibilities are?
Sure. So, and forgive me, everybody listening to this, but Christine, you're asking in my opinion, probably
I feel
one of
like
the
it's
most
a very
important.
basic question, but I'd love to get your take on it.
It's one of the most important questions, though, and here's why. My background has been always in science. I graduated college. I was microbiology, immunology, and parasitology. For me, I've always, and as an investigator, it's always just the facts, ma'am, kind of guy, no nonsense. So that's the way I pursue things. We as human beings, a lot of scientists speculate because we are what we call cardiosocial animals. We look in terms of extremes. Everything we do is almost in a binary sense. If someone were to describe you something, it's usually in terms of it's good, it's bad, it's hot, it's cold, it's black, it's white, it's up or down, it's left or right. And that is because some scientists now speculate, because most of our time in our mother's womb was listening to the rhythmic beat of our mother's heart. That's true with all of us that were born, and that's maybe why we look in terms of this phenomena this way. It's either from Earth or it's from outer space, right? But we realize that's not necessarily true. In the world of quantum physics and nature, we realize that there's many other options in between. And every time we try to put something in a nice, neat little box in the world of science or nature, we're usually proven wrong. And I think this topic is no different. And this is why I say all options need to be on the table. Most of us would say, well, if it's not us, if it's not Russian, it's not US, then it must be, I hate to use the word, but extraterrestrial. Not necessarily. There's all sorts of other options that this could be. This could be something that's frankly as natural as us, could be from this planet. And we're only at the point now technologically where we can interact. And as crazy as this may sound, and certainly I'm not saying I prescribe to this, it's just an option. We all were aware of Newtonian physics at the end of the Renaissance, and Sir Isaac Newton introduced the notion of gravity and whatnot, and force equals mass times acceleration. And along comes this guy with funny hair last century named Einstein, and proposes relativity and a whole different model of the universe in which that space and time are actually connected. Space and time can be stretched, it can be compressed, and our whole notion of the universe is actually should be different. And then 40 years ago, we really have the beginnings of quantum physics and really a better understanding. And as bizarre as quantum physics is, we're now recognizing that's really one of the fundamental ways to understand the universe we live in. And as crazy as it may be, someone once explained it as you have a box and a dog walks into a box and out walks two cats. And yet that's exactly what we're seeing. And so my point being is that there are a lot of options here. And I think we need to, this is why I say we need to keep all options on the table until they're no longer on the table. I don't know the answer. Frankly, I don't think anybody does. And anybody who tells you they do, I would submit to you, I would approach them very cautiously. The bottom line is we don't know. And we need to ask all the questions. And this is why probably this is a bigger question than just for national security. This is not just a potential national security threat. We probably need to bring in academics and scientists and a whole bunch of folks to have this conversation. Yes, there's a national security issue here, but there's also probably more to it.
Thank you so much.
Let's jump to Brandy next, Gov.
Thank you so much, Jesse, and thank you, Luis. I report on the intersection of the government and emerging technology at NextGov, like Jesse said. I kind of want to stick with this topic for a second. I'm really curious about lawmakers' appetite for this on the Hill. You mentioned those briefings you've been to recently. Can you tell us a little bit more about that? The lawmakers engaging you mentioned bipartisan. Please elaborate. Are they engaging with you? Was the invitation on their behalf, or was it more you reaching out to them? And would you say that the number of those interested in this is growing?
Wow. Okay. So first of all, I have the utmost respect for our lawmakers and our representatives. At the end of the day, they're there to serve the will of the people. And I believe that is exactly what they're trying to do regarding this topic. I'm encouraged to see this nonpartisan effort, or maybe perhaps bipartisan effort, to look into this. As far as discussing specific conversations with specific representatives and or their staff, I'm going to politely sidestep that, and only because out of respect for them. What I certainly don't want to do is say anything that without these individuals' permission, regardless. Only because I think they're still in the process of fact finding, and I don't want to do anything to interfere with that process. And out of respect for them, I certainly wouldn't want to speak on their behalf. What I will say is that it's been my honor and privilege from time to time to interact with certain people on the legislative and the executive branch of our government to help facilitate this conversation and be able to hopefully provide some lessons learned when I was the director of AATIP, where maybe some things we got wrong, so they don't make the same mistake, and we can spend taxpayer money in a responsible way, right? Let's not reinvent the wheel here, or in this case, let's not make some of the same mistakes. But I will tell you, there's a unanimous, every time I've had this engagement, for the most part, there's a unanimous reaction of, yes, this is a potential national security issue. I'll go one step further, Brandy, on this. And I've used this analogy before. If I may ask, Brandy, where are you calling in from?
From Washington, D.C.
Okay, so Washington. So I'm sure like most of you, you all live in a very nice neighborhood. May I ask you a question? Do you lock your front door before you go to bed at night?
My apartment is so innovative that my front door locks automatically.
Okay, well, I'm not so fancy, but I do the same thing. And there's a reason for that. In fact, I suspect most people you ask would probably say, not that we expect anything bad to happen, but just out of a matter of recourse, we usually lock our front doors. We might even check the windows from time to time and turn on your alarm system before you go to bed. Let's say one morning you come downstairs to have a nice hot cup of tea or coffee, and all of a sudden, as you're walking downstairs, there's muddy boot prints in your living room carpet. Now, no one's been hurt, nothing's out of place, nothing's been disturbed, but despite you locking the doors and the windows and turning on the alarm the night before, there are muddy boot prints in your living room that weren't there the night before. Now, the question is that a threat? And my response to you is that it could be if it wanted to be. So we probably should figure it out. And I think this is the same approach that our senior people in the executive branch and legislative branch are taking. Now, with that said, that's not necessarily everybody. There are some pockets, some elements within the executive branch, particularly, that are very resistant to this topic. And unfortunately, we're one of the reasons why it's such a difficult time when I first left the department. They were not happy about having this conversation. They felt that it made them look inept. They felt in some cases that it challenged their philosophical and theological belief systems. There were all sorts of, and in some cases, they just couldn't process it. I would sit there and give an hour briefing. I'd bring pilots in and the radar data and the operators, and we'd give this big briefing with videos and photographs. And at the end of the briefing, I would just get this blank stare. And they would just look at me and say, "So how does Miami Dolphins doing this season?" And they just, for whatever reason, couldn't process it. So I guess my response to you, Brandy, is that people will process this information differently. However, I remain optimistic with the interaction that I've had, that for the most part, everyone seems to be taking this topic in the manner that they should. With caution, but diligence, and they're asking the right questions. And whether you're Republican or Democrat or independent, anybody who's willing to take this on, I applaud. This is a nonpartisan issue. This shouldn't be a political conversation. This is a conversation that involves every one of us. And I'm happy to see that conversation is now beginning.
Thank you so much. And just one more real quickly, if I may, since this is the first time that we have met face to face, I've read a bit and seen a bit about you, but can you just elaborate really quickly on your motivation? What drives you? Your journey with this has been a long one. So what keeps you pushing forward?
Brandy, I'm going to get a little emotional here. I took an oath a long time ago to serve this country and to defend this country from all enemies, foreign and domestic. My father was a political prisoner of Cuba. We were in exile from Cuba because my father's involvement in the Bay of Pigs invasion. This country has offered my family opportunity that no other country. In fact, we were rejected from Cuba. This country gave us opportunity that nobody else would or could. And from a very young age, I was always told to pay back and serve. And so after college, I joined the Army, and after the Army, I got involved in some special activities and became a member of the intelligence community. It's about the truth. It's about this is a topic that doesn't belong under the provenance of any government or organization or institution. I took an oath. And when I left the government, I was never relieved of that oath. They never said, "Okay, Lou, you don't have to do this anymore." Ironically enough, I left the department to finish the very job that they gave me in the first place. It wasn't out of disloyalty I left the department. It was actually out of a profound sense of loyalty, serving with people like Sean Cahill over here, who were witness to something extraordinary, and yet their chain of command didn't want them to report it. In some cases, people lost their jobs, they lost their flight status, they lost their security clearance, and were told that they were crazy. And yet it turns out this was real. This was real. I can't imagine the burden this has been on the shoulders of some people. As tough as it was for me, Brandy, I had it pretty good to compare to some other people that lost their careers over this. And that's not right. That's wrong. And I'm doing this for our men and women in uniform who are still coming into contact with these things. As of today, like this week, this hasn't stopped. This is continuing to occur. And so I do this for them. They need a voice. Someone has to be willing to talk to our elected officials and our officials in government and have the conversation. It doesn't matter how inconvenient it is, how uncomfortable it is, or how unpopular it is. This is, as I've said before, this is not a conversation like fine wine where the longer we keep a cork on it, the better it gets. This is a conversation like rotten fruit or vegetables in the refrigerator. And the longer it stays in there, the more it's going to stink. We know now beyond a reasonable doubt, as an investigator, my job was very simple: collect the truth and speak the truth, and present that information to the jury. And that's all. It didn't matter what Lue Elizondo thinks. It doesn't matter what I think. What matters is what the jury thinks. And that's what this is about. And in this case, the American people are the jury. My job is just to provide that information to the jury and let the people decide what they want to do about it. And Brandy, I'll tell you, at the end of the day, if the American people have the discussion and they don't want to do anything about it, or they decide it's not a priority, I'm fine with that. Then I'll go retire. I'll go work at Walmart and leave all this craziness behind, because it's taken a tremendous toll on me. But to not allow the people to have that conversation in the first place, to me, is far more dangerous than anything coming into our airspace that we can't control. Because if we can't even have the conversation about it, we've got bigger problems on our hands. That to me is the greatest failure of all, that we can't even have the conversation because of fear of reprisal and social taboo and stigma. That to me is the greatest issue.
Thank you so much.
Reese, before we get to you, I want to inject a question here from Duncan Phoenix at CBS Las Vegas, whose microphone is having some issues. He wonders if you can address the concern that some people have with these sightings, such as the recent pyramid video. Is it equipment issues or errors, or are military personnel also seeing UAP with their own eyes and reporting what they personally experienced?
Yes and yes. There's tremendous eyewitness accounts that's backed up by electro-optical data and radar data to substantiate that the event is real and it's occurring. And in other cases, you have a hypersensitization of individuals, and they're reporting strange things in the sky. And it turns out that sometimes those strange things aren't so strange. And that's what one would expect, right? So the more people that look up in the sky, the more people are going to notice things, and the more you're going to get misidentifications. But that's okay, because that's the job of the UAP task force, should be anyways, to create filters to separate the wheat and chaff and be able to determine what is regular and what's not. I mean, now with today's technology, I can get on my personal device and look at Flight Tracker, and I can see if that's a 737 I see over the horizon with blinking lights. I can see if it's a helicopter, or I can look on the horizon over the water and use my application using AIS to determine, is that a ship and I'm actually looking at a shrimp boat and the lights off of a shrimp boat. That's okay. The problem is that a lot of these aren't. They're not drones. They're not an effect of the infrared camera, because you might have 5 or 6 different infrared cameras looking at the same thing, and they're not all failing you. They don't all suffer from the same issue. So that's when you have to scratch your head and say, okay, we're actually dealing with something here. Let's not forget, look, our men and women in uniform are trained observers, just like law enforcement. And if I haven't said this before, I'll do it now. This is an example. These are training aids that I had when I was literally in the military as an intelligence officer in Korea. And you can see here, these are silhouettes of aircraft, enemy aircraft. And pilots are trained to the same level of, if not more, to be trained observers in the air. They have to make a split-second decision. Is that an enemy aircraft? Is it an Su-22? Is it a MiG-25? Is it a European Tornado? Is it an F-16? What is it? And they have to be able to do that from 20 miles away. Their life depends on it. And so when they're reporting to you that they are encountering something that can do barrel rolls over their aircraft, that doesn't have wings, doesn't have control surfaces, rudders, cockpits, anything that we normally associate with a traditional aircraft, you got to say, okay, then, well, what is it? Is it some sort of foreign technology? Sure, I guess it could be. Could be some sort of new type of drone. But drones still have to abide by our understanding of the laws of physics. And therein lies the question again. Okay, if it's a foreign adversarial drone, how come we don't have anything to do to? I mean, look, we have counter drone technology on ships. I'm not going to say what they are, but we can knock them out of the sky. Drones aren't a problem for us. That's a fact. We have radar on ships. We know if it's a plane. We know if it's a military aircraft. These are simple things to figure out. It's not like someone gets on the ship one day with some infrared binoculars and say, "Hey, that's strange in the sky. I'm going to go ahead and record that." The reason why they're recording is because there's probably something interesting in the skies. In some cases, yeah, there could be a readily explainable explanation for it. But from my experience, there's a lot that aren't and are very compelling, and they're displaying the 5 observables, which is a totally different conversation. We're definitely not talking about a drone at that point.
Reese, Wapo.
Thanks, Jesse, and thanks, Lou, for doing this. It looks like my internet connection might be cutting out at the wrong time, but if you can hear me, I would love to know what visibility, if any, the folks on this call have into what will be included in the report, and what role, if any, are you playing in actually compiling it?
So I'm going to politely defer the second question. I don't want to be evasive, but I also don't want to do anything that puts the government in an uncomfortable position. If you want to know if there's any role I'm playing with the government, I'm going to respectfully deflect and let you ask the government and let them make a determination what an appropriate response would be. As far as what would be in the report, I think, as we discussed before, I made the not so funny joke that it takes longer sometimes to renovate a kitchen than it does to put out this 180-day report. The 9/11 Commission report almost took 3 years. So I think it's very unlikely that we're going to have a comprehensive report that Congress expects and deserves, frankly, at the unclassified level in time. I think what we can hope for is a report, an interim report that's going to say, here are the knowns, here are the unknowns. And by the way, there's a lot more unknowns than knowns. And here's our plan for addressing those unknowns. And we're going to provide you another report periodically until we find those answers. My hope would be that we have an enduring capability. A task force, by definition, government definition, is a temporary capability. A lot of people don't know that, but that's what it is, whether it's the ISR task force or the IED task force that we had established during Iraq. These are all temporary bodies, and I think this topic deserves an enduring capability, and frankly, maybe even beyond ONI, Office of Naval Intelligence. Maybe we need a whole of government approach and bring in folks like NASA and FAA and NOAA and everybody else. Maybe Department of Energy. Bring everybody to bring in academics and scientists from renowned universities, bring in some of our international friends and allies to have this conversation. Maybe even the United Nations. I don't think. I think we need to manage our expectations. If we think that we're going to have a simple solution here come June, I think there's very little chance of that happening. I think we're going to wind up with more questions than answers. I think there'll maybe some answers, but there's probably going to be more questions in the long run. Let me say this, if no one's going to say anything. Folks, sincerely and from the bottom of my heart, thank you for doing what you do. I know journalistic integrity is very important, just like as an intelligence officer, right? We kind of had the same mission, collect the truth and speak the truth, and try to leave our personal bias out of it. And I know that all of you are taking a chance on even listening to a conversation like this. But I will tell you that it is deeply appreciated. When I have a chance, an opportunity to talk to people on the street, they're happy that this topic is being covered, and finally being covered in a serious sense without all the nonsense baggage that's attached to it. So I want to thank you all for your time this afternoon, and again, just doing what you do. It's profoundly as a civilian now and out of the government. Thank you. I appreciate it very much.